Danse Nito Temtek. Hello, everyone. I'm Kathy Richardson, Kinu Isqueyu, and I'm speaking with a wonderful person, friend, colleague from Jojage, Montreal today. And her name is Zeina Ismail Allouche, and she has done really important work around international adoption, child rights, and basically creating safety in child welfare systems. Hi, Zaina. Do you want to introduce yourself and situate your work a little bit?
Yeah, hi Kathy, and thank you so much for always offering a platform where we can share things that are most of the time silenced in the public sphere. So offering that space is so precious. My name is Zeina Ismail Allouche. I would like to welcome you also in my language. So مرحبا. وبتمنى يكون نهارك حلو اليوم. أنا من بيروت، من لبنان، و- وبتصور حاملة معي كمان الروح. So I said that I'm so happy to be with you, and I hope your day is good, and that I come from Beirut, Lebanon, and that I hope that I bring also the spirit of the Lebanese people with me to this very precious land. I've arrived here as a settler in 2015, and since then I'm learning, unpacking, reconciling with that identity because it's not easy. It's an identity that is not easy to carry when we come to realize um, the history and mm, the stolen lands and and it's not only lands, it's stolen culture, stolen language, stolen life. It's an ongoing legacy of systemic violence, of colonialism, that is unfortunately intersecting a lot um, with what's happening in the Middle East, with the villages in the south of Lebanon being totally erased. Um, yeah, it's hard to start from that space, but would want to acknowledge what's happening in the south of Lebanon because it get silenced in the public sphere and the international sphere. But I see always that very specific connection with the legacy of pushing indigenous people out of their lands. And for me, it's not by coincidence that it's mainly villages in Lebanon that are demolished and erased. And because the village is the community, is the connection with the land, is the connection with the trees, is connection with the flowers that grow there, with the goods that grow there, with the water, with the river, um, with that unity with nature. And I think this is the biggest war. It's the war against connection with land. And this is what we learned from indigenous people in Canada as well, with their strong connection with land. Um, and yeah, this war against like cutting that umbilical cord with the womb of our precious land and earth. So from from this space, I would like to acknowledge that in my presence in Jojogi, uh, I learned also the indigenous way of knowing. I learned how much I need to unsettle my colonial learning, even within the frame of children's rights, where the focus is on the types of violence, whereas the big issue is the systemic violence that is subtly uh, paving the road for those types of violence to exist. And that it's by the end of the day, it's up to the duty bearers like the governments, the systems, to provide so violence is prevented. Um, I I have long I sometimes I hesitate to say how many years I have in terms of experience because it reflects on my age, but age is also wisdom, I hope, if not craziness. So I've been working in the space of preventing violence against children since like more than 30 years. In Lebanon, in the Middle East, but also internationally. And working in that space was always directing me towards forced separation, like this separation from the family, from the community, from the culture, as a major form, like of violence that totally um, remove any safety net for the child when they are in the situation, and that this kind of violence is perpetrated and recreated throughout their lives. So what we do in that forced separation in the moment is a deliberate, systemic, and political intentional violence that is meant to be reproduced. So it's not we're only depriving the child from a safety net, but we are preparing and seeding for an adult who is also not grounded. And this became my major, I don't want to say obsession, but like thought and thinking roadmap that connected what's happening in the world with the legacy of forced separation on indigenous people back then and until now,
Yeah.
and all all the transfer that's happening worldwide, because it's not international adoption, it's a deliberate transfer of children and youth away from their natural places.
Mhm.
So I hope it's not a long introduction, but in a formal way, I need to mention that I am a social worker. My BA is in social work. Then I moved into studying public health, a master's degree in public health. And when I landed in Canada, as a way also to find a place for me on this land, I earned I hope I earned it, but I worked and finished my a PhD that is grounded in indigenous worldviews and indigenous methodologies, and that study that forced separation from the child welfare system, a placement into foster families, into social care, up to what we call the international adoption and transracial adoption as a continuous way of, as a continuous war against children and their communities.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is me. I hope it was not that long.
And in a way, that's what brought us together, isn't it? You were working on a research project where we were helping Indigenous youth in this area to reconnect with land and culture. And you and I spoke a lot about Indigenous methodologies, but also what we had in common was trying to address the child welfare system and its failings, basically. And I think we continue to really have a heart connection around this issue of the vulnerabilization of children, and that is done purposefully to to disconnect, as was the 60s scoop and the residential schools, so that perpetrators have uh, smoother access to exploit these young ones. And they're often ones that are from lower social classes financially, or are already vulnerable in some way. And so we're interested in child welfare transformation, addressing human trafficking, and these kinds of dynamics that also preclude youth voices and perspectives from being part of the conversation and part of the solution. Is that a
Yeah.
fair estimation?
Yeah, exactly, Kathy, and thank you for bringing this out because I remember, and I keep on saying it, that the first door opened for me in on Turtle Island in Johojoki was an indigenous door with a common friend, Elizabeth Fast, who accepted in the beginning to allow me into academia, but also it connected me with you, and with you I would rather say I was learning a lot about that worldview that helped me deconstruct and unsettle the learning that I accumulated uh, in a rather colonial settings.
Mhm.
Um, so all this discourse about what should be done from an outsider perspective, rather than really looking at what is provided from the insider perspective. And my biggest learning is that, as I mentioned earlier, that I contributed to the formulation of the UN guidelines on children without parental care. And in those guidelines, we speak a lot about the importance of prevention, and that any alternative should be grounded in communities. Yet we appropriated this knowledge for us, and we did not learn enough and research enough to see and acknowledge that this was the indigenous practice pre-colonial time, and that custom adoption or placing children in care within the community as part of a ceremony that recognizes also the roots, the identity of the child, and assign the care on behalf of the community to someone, but also under the supervision of the whole community. So we appropriated that knowledge. It's only through learning and researching into the local and indigenous practice that I finally realized this is not new.
Mhm.
We did not bring the remedy out of our minds. It was practiced pre-colonial time, and it's proving that now it's the best way for healing for youth who were deprived from their spaces, organic spaces, communities, and language. So when they are struggling, the best healing is to reconnect and reestablish that reconnection.
Yeah, it always, I don't know, surprises me that all the indigenous literature on child welfare and child well-being is about what you just talked about, and yet it's not being done very broadly, and certainly not in the mainstream community. So I'm not exactly sure why so many people in power can just ignore it. And I know you've always been contesting erasure of some very important knowledges. And that's one of the things I've always really appreciated about you is when you came here, you did the work. You were open to learning, and you really wanted to be ethical and respectful and always acknowledge the land that you're on, the Haudenosaunee, the elders, the teachers, the knowledge keepers, the trees, the plants, the flowers, everything that's here, the medicines, and you never take it for granted for one day. And I have to say, in my role as a professor, I often supervise work done from many different perspectives, and I really seldom see much attention to where I am. It's just taken for granted. Oh, I can live anywhere. It's just Canada. And I hope I'm in the same boat as you in this. I'm grateful every day that there is a nation, a people that have let me live here. Um, because as we know too well, there's so many people who are stateless, landless, homeless by no fault of their own. Um, And I think it's part of our prayers that ground us to the ancestors of this land, the earth itself. So you've recently put out a paper called From Lebanon to Canada, and I read it, and once again, I was amazed. Like, here is another issue that I didn't even know about, and that people are not talking about, but it's really important and shocking, and that is we're adopting children into countries where there's not even agreements in place to say that they can actually live there with their adopted family, and they're getting caught often between borders. So do you want to elaborate a little bit on your findings around that?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, for mentioning this. I would want to acknowledge that, as you mentioned, this connection with the learning and unpacking, unsettling is a continuous work, and
Mhm.
it's a hard work. And honestly, Kathy, I wouldn't blame people for their fatigue anymore
Mhm.
because I know how much is tiring and how much doors can be closed in one's own face when we commit and we keep the unsettling work.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not justifying, but I'm acknowledging, and yourself, you've been into those situations, I guess, where sticking or believing, it's not about stubbornness, but believing honestly and candidly. It's not a tokenistic stance. It's when it becomes part of the system, of the way of yeah, the way we live, the way we see things. When it becomes so natural, it's very hard to go against one's own nature. Yet, what's the normative way is somewhere else. And this is the main reason why systems are reluctant to change. First, because they're benefiting from it,
Yeah.
and there is a whole industry around the child welfare system, its connection with prisons. And I remember now the writings of Palmatar, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, that speaks about that in business, the vicious circle of business where the child welfare system become a pipeline for prisons, and that there is a whole industry around that,
Mhm.
um, going up to funding police and investing in arms rather than investing in simple solutions that might prevent the harm from the kickoff of the circle. So I just wanted to say that it's hard and it's work in progress. And this is why we don't take things for granted. And here come a story where it renders me also like in that ambiguous, not ambiguous, in that space where do I speak and then what will come
Mhm.
after the words are out, or if I silence myself and what it will come inside me in terms of silencing myself. So there is no win-win situation.
Yeah.
So I have chosen to speak. So what happened is that we know that Quebec, Canada in general, and Quebec specifically has banned adoption from Lebanon, international adoption from Lebanon, because of two reasons. Lebanon did not ratify the Hague Convention, 1994, that regulates and put a kind of restrictions on international adoption as the very, 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 very at the end of the very resort for
Mhm.
children who have no other alternatives. So this is one. And second, because of the history of Lebanon with uh, like intersecting international adoption with child trafficking. And this is part of the work that I've done in Lebanon and internationally, which is tracing those sorry to say so, transactions. So a family from like a Lebanese origin, uh, And I assume they waited long for local adoption, or maybe they don't qualify. I don't know, but they did not um, they don't they did not, I don't know, succeed or resort to local adoption, so adopting a child from within Quebec. And they did not seek adoption through the other countries that are recognized by Canada as countries of origin, though we need to highlight that all the reports highlight that 99% of international adoptions in the country of origin are are not legal. It means there are intersections with child trafficking and halted processes, yet they get legalized in the receiving country. So Canada has allowed for adoption from China, from South Korea, from Vietnam, from like the South American countries, Colombia, Republic Dominican. Yet it did not allow it from Lebanon. I'm not saying that it should allow it from Lebanon. I'm saying that there is kind of bystanders here. So to go back, a family from Lebanese origin, they went to Lebanon. It's like 1 year and a half, like back now, and they adopted a child, a girl child in Lebanon. And with the hope, with the intention of returning back to Canada, to Quebec.
Mhm.
Yet, when they submitted the legal documents, Quebec refused to allow this adoption because the banning of adoption from Lebanon.
Yeah.
So what happened is the woman stayed with the baby in Lebanon, and the father or the the man came back, because it's hard for me to use mother and father in this situation, the adoptive family.
Yeah.
And then there was a big media lobby advocacy to force Quebec to allow the documents to be processed. And from my side, this raised a lot of questions because now the child, the girl child, has been living for 1 year and a half with the adoptive mother
Mhm.
in Lebanon. So already the separation from her own identity has taken place.
Yeah.
And there is a limbo in the official documents. I cannot start my thinking by saying, oh, the poor family and should be reunited. And then this is because there is a mindset that pushed me to deconstruct the decision.
Yeah.
Why did we go to Lebanon when we know that in Quebec this is banned?
Yeah.
And it takes me back to Lebanon to say how the decision, the legal decision in Lebanon was made to allow processing adoption, while in Lebanon they know from a legal perspective that the child will not and cannot have access to Canada.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of a place where adults took a decision because I'm not doubting their desire to become parents.
Yeah.
I'm not doubting now that they care for the child because the mother is staying, or the adoptive mother is staying with her in Lebanon. I'm not doubting all of this. But is the desire to have a child, an enough justification to go against the line
Mhm.
and the legal boundaries, and go to a place and allow for a legal decision, a court decision? So I'm wondering also how that court decision was done. Knowing also, I have researched the adoption processes in Lebanon, and I can testify that no single adoption is done properly. So
Yes.
how that family from Quebec bypassed all the boundaries and located a child who is in real need to be adopted.
Mm.
Why it was adopted from by that family, not by a local family
Yeah.
in Lebanon. Um, how much they had to invest in this process.
Right.
I don't want to mention that how much they had to pay to bypass this. But yeah, so it made me think about how much sometimes we as human beings, we follow that desire
Mhm.
and we try to put it into or contextualize it in a right.
Yes.
And the only human being who's suffering now the most is that child.
Yes.
We again, the
Mhm.
system and the desires, and even the bystander in Canada has vulnerabilized the child. And it's a situation where there is no single decision that is also the most, the best,
Mhm.
the best. Because if you allow this, it means you're opening the door as a country for falsification of documents in the country of origin.
Mhm.
If you allow this also, it means you're opening the door for more child trafficking and transfer.
Yeah.
But if you close it only for Lebanon and you open it for other countries who has the same pattern, it means there is a kind of bystander and discrimination.
Mhm.
So, and the child, I agree that it's hard to separate the child again from a new relationship that is being established. And also, what are those messages that the child is receiving in that limbo situation?
Mhm.
So I wrote that piece knowing that it might create also kind of issues with the Lebanese community in Montreal because they are all lobbying to support that family.
Right.
And I'm not against them. I'm just, and this is our role, is
Mhm.
to analyze situations and to think, so what was the best interest in that situation? Who created that situation?
Mhm.
And it's not only the family who decided, who had that desire to adopt, but it's all the systems here and there.
Yeah. I mean, you're raising so many salient points, and what I turn to in my mind is those children, thinking of Indigenous children in Canada being removed by the state forcibly and then put into other homes where they have absolutely no connection, no grounding, no real understanding of the new ways of being and how they're supposed to live and form loving attachments or feel like people are looking after their well-being when everything is new, everything is uncertain, and in these cases, everything is very, very frightening. And what that does psychologically, what that child has to respond to and navigate every day, you can anticipate there's going to be a lot of suffering, right? A lot of pain. Hopefully not throughout the life, but it's a rough journey, right?
Yeah, it's a rough journey yet. And this is the problem, that this whole system is portrayed as we're saving kids.
Yeah.
What would have been the destiny of those kids if it's not up to those amazing families who would want to give love and care for children who are not their own children. So there is also this kind of propaganda
Yeah.
that is portraying, again, I'm literally saying a desire as the biggest charity ever. And instead of looking at the child and their needs, and we do agree, Kathy, that there are children who might need an alternative place where they are loved. We're not denying, but unfortunately, uh, the percentage of those children who are in real need for separation is very low compared to the whole spectrum of forced separation that is justified by another layer, another line of decision, which is the desire and the political uh, and sometimes economic agenda. And I would like really to link the economic and political together,
Sure.
because that separation is meant again to dismantle the fabric of communities.
Mhm.
If I speak only about countries who accept the children to be trafficked, because there is a kind of, we say these are traffickers, but the states, they just shed like, um, they turn their face so they don't see, and sometimes they are implicated in the
Yeah,
processes.
of course.
So for those governments, they are pushing away a problem out of their out of their,
Mhm.
yeah, of their momental concern. So if we have children who need alternative care, we
Mhm.
need to provide services, processes, we need to invest in the family so separation does not happen. But when international adoption arrives, you are transferring a problem from the country of origin and sending it to the family, adoptive family.
Mhm.
And then with the hope that those will be silenced for life.
Mhm.
Yet, those children who became adults are regaining their voice. And it's because of them. And thankfully, like we with gratitude to their voice. And
Yes.
this is what you've started with, is that the voices of youth impacted would inform and would shed light on what should be done. So those who were transferred into adoption out of sight,
Yeah.
they're regaining their voice and they are fighting back
Yeah.
for their biological rights,
Mhm.
for their origins, for to connecting with their culture, and uh, and maybe finding back their mothers who are also silenced. So it's a war against two essential um, pillars
Mhm.
of what makes a community: the mother, the womb, the earth, and the child.
Mhm. Yeah.
So those who are becoming more vibrant are unveiling and covering the falsifications of documents, and they are suing governments who got implicated in facilitating this.
Mhm.
And if we learn from the indigenous history and indigenous researchers in Canada, they are also, they represent those voices because many of them were impacted by the system,
Mhm.
and they are trying to rectify what happened, the violence that happened, by informing not only the Canadians, the world,
Yes.
about what happened in those systems, and that those systems would create more violence that will recreate a kind of vicious circle of recreating the violence unless those are reconnected, are allowed to reconnect with their identities.
Mhm. And that's what we saw with your PhD research, the voices of adults, uh, earlier, adoptees reclaiming their lives, their histories, their origins, and having space, a safe space to share their narratives. And I think it was really, really important research, and I'm glad that you're continuing on this path because you know, there's actually a lot that we can do. And so many people say, oh, that's too hard. I'm just going to um, close my eyes or change the channel or whatever it is. But we can also do things every day to systemically change things, right? To promote global peace, to stop funding aggressors, to stop using our resources to build weapons, to stop supporting corruption in any way we can. Do you want to add a few more things that you think that we can do, even if it isn't just directly helping this one child, but looking ahead, maybe 7 generations, maybe 7 months? What can we do to ease things up so these children aren't continually being sent off into a void?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, for this question. I would want to start by saying that this PhD work, the title of the research, but also the research creation that came with it, was chosen by the owners of the PhD, those who entrusted us with their narratives of being forcibly separated from their families and mothers through international transracial adoption. They decided to call it the ineradicable voice narratives.
Mm,
So ineradicable.
yes.
So when the objective was to silence them for life, they are telling us you cannot, because our voices and our narratives are ineradicable. So for me, that was a very strong statement made by them that I honor, and I keep on repeating this. Now, back to the other part of the question, how can we keep on our commitments and honor our commitments? And I resource myself with a basic grounding principle, ethical principle that I learned from you, from Indigenous people, from amazing Indigenous women in Canada, which is that relational aspect.
Mhm.
Um, Building relationships and authentic relationships and honoring the commitments towards those relationships and being the voice when the others are voices are not being heard, yet not appropriating their voices.
Mhm.
And ask always if I'm allowed to speak, if I'm allowed to share, because I came to learn about something, and I'm starting to advocate for this word, like that sovereignty on narratives. We cannot claim sovereignty and self-determination when we extract and appropriate narratives.
Mhm.
So these are daily commitments. When I wake up in the morning and I keep on doing that, I look at the sky and I search for the moon and I say good morning. When I see a bird, I speak with the bird and hoping that this relational aspect is continuous and it's propagating elsewhere. But most importantly, when I see someone on the streets lost in their own spaces, I try to look at them through the eyes and tell them as much as I can that I'm doing my best to keep on seeing you
Mhm.
and listening to you and doing my best to be a voice that is supportive and not to add to your pain.
Mhm.
And sometimes when the eyes meet,
Mhm.
it's it's transformative to me. So it's transformative to me. I hope, I hope in a way it will be transformative to the person as well, because we've done that. They're not there on the streets by coincidence.
Mm.
So I think simple things can be also tremendous in showing up, being there, also with the hope that when I feel that I'm left out from the scene, that someone also will look at me in the eyes. It's reciprocity. And it's also the other grounding principle that I've learned from indigenous ways of being and existing.
Mhm. Well, Zeina, thank you so much for sharing your work and your thoughts about this really important topic. I just want to say, like, hi, hi, and all my relations.
Well, my relations.